spell.
It's all right. Hello, everyone, and happy summer, and welcome to another interview here on the channel. I am your host, Gil Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and welcome to today's episode. Now, my guest today grew up in England until the age of 7 when she moved to Jamaica with her family. She has always loved reading and writing, but leaned into it more much later in 2019. She spent her entire 20s traveling and working and loving it. She enjoys meeting people, learning how to work with people from all over the world, and problem solving. And while working in hospitality, she's writing her debut nonfiction story, which explores self discovery and healing. Fantasy and mystery and thriller are her favorite genres, and since finding her other half, she's gotten into romance. And to tell us more about that and more, let's give a huge round of applause to a first timer here on the channel, Helen G-W. Helen, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, Helen. You're welcome. So before we dive into the questions, is there anything more you'd like to add about your background, your upcoming book, and also forgot to mention, also being an ARC reader for some books, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I got into ARC reading when I joined Bookstagram, which is not too long ago. It was probably early this year that I joined Bookstagram, and best decision ever. I don't know why I didn't join it sooner. I've really enjoyed ARC reading. The ARC read I've finished last week, I think, was Arabella's Awakening by Jessie Pollock, and absolutely blew my mind. I loved the entire book from start to finish. The last time I was so enthralled with a book was when I read um, Fourth Wing. So
Mm.
it was really, really good. I absolutely loved it.
I will say you're probably the, what was it, like the fourth or fifth author I've had on the show that has mentioned Fourth Wing. Like I have seen that all over Instagram. I've seen it all over, of course, Barnes and Noble. Like seriously, whatever that book has done, a lot of people, are enjoying it. And then I've also had people on the other side that said that it needed a little bit of fine tuning, but to each their own. And that's the fun thing about books. It allows for different perspectives and for people
Mhm.
to review it in their own way. So let's actually talk about that. So, how did this love of reading and writing come about? What was sort of like the aha moment of your childhood?
Probably when I was about 4, maybe 3. My mom has always been a reader. She used to have this huge trunk of books. Given a lot of them were Star Trek books, she's a huge Star Trek nerd, but she made it a point to make sure that I was reading. So whenever she wanted to read, she would hand me a book. And at first, as a toddler, I was eating them, but slowly I actually started looking at them. And she worked for the Metropolitan Police, and the library was right next door.
Oh, wow.
So I was always able to sneak into the library. And she found me one day and was furious. And she's Scottish, so she has a temper. And the
Oh, okay.
librarian was like, no, leave her. She's our favorite kid. She just sits in the corner and reads all day long. And some of the other police officers that worked under my mom would actually take me to the library and just drop me off or come and check on me throughout the day. And it just became my favorite place to be. And if I wasn't reading, I either had a book in my hand or I was trying to read. So it
Wow.
just it just happened.
Nice. And then I understand later that you are now in the process, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also in the process of writing your own nonfiction book, which is discussing self discovery and healing. And how does that sort of come about? And what is sort of like the title, if I'm not mistaken?
So the title I actually just released not too long ago, and it's called Let's Get Nude. It is a book of like you said, self-discovery and healing. It is a time to be honest with yourself. And actually, just this morning, I think I have finalized my book cover. So I'm really
Ooh.
excited about that. And as we're talking, I actually have signups for more ARC readers coming in. So I'm getting really excited and really nervous at the same time. It actually started last year, 2023, November. I worked overseas my entire 20s. And in 2021, the end of 2021, I met my now fiance. And we, last year in 23, December, he proposed to me.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
thank you. I came home in October. In November, we went away together, and it has been a very rocky 2 years, because I have my own stuff going on. He has his stuff. And then we're trying to come together as a couple. And, life is lifing for so many of
Right.
us. So we actually had an argument while I was overseas, and we were just going at it. And we're on the phone, and it's really easy to hang up on each other and just be like, whatever. And we really pushed each other not to do that,
Mm.
and made it very, very clear that what we want is each other. And he actually said to me, we need to be honest with each other. Let's just get completely nude. He said it can only benefit us later. And it was that moment I thought, let's get nude. I'm going to write that. And I said it to him, and he said, what? And I said, we've done so much talking. We've done so much discovery of ourselves, of each other. And I want other people to feel this way. And I'd had an idea to write a journal, but I didn't have a laptop at the time. My
Right.
laptop had given up on life. So I had started looking for one and thought, I'm going to invest in myself. But I was really, really nervous to do it. And I was actually out with my best friend, Jessica, and we were in Walmart, and I saw this laptop that I'm on right now. And I thought, you know what? When I get paid, if it's still here and still on sale, I'm going to get it. 2 days later, it showed up at the place I work. And my friend called me and said, I don't know what your idea is, but I believe in you. It's going to be great. Good luck. And I just burst into tears. So I wrote my first journal, which is Walk Good. It is just a prompted journal, a guided journal. And this book, Let's Get Nude, actually started out as a journal. And the
Mm.
more I wrote, the more I felt like it had to be more, because we do live in a time where everyone is preaching about mental health and everyone is talking about healing, but actually doing it, you kind of lose the momentum when you hit that roadblock or you hit that emotional stumble and you really don't want it. And
Right.
it's hard to push through that. It can be very hard to push through it. And I've had to do it. And my healing started in 2018. I really want other people to get to where I've gotten to. And it's a continuous journey. It doesn't stop. There is no finish line you get to and you're like, I'm healed, all is good. No, you got to keep going. It is a constant walk. There's going to be stumbles. You're going to step back a few bits, but those setbacks will only propel you further forward.
Definitely. And this is actually rather interesting, which leads into the first two questions, which is, so for writing a book such as this, Let's Get Nude, what was sort of like the initial desire, or rather promise, you want to satisfy to your future readers and people who you've shared this with, who are intrigued by its concept?
So the first really critical feedback I got was actually from a friend. And the comment was, get nuder. My first draft, I'd written I was holding back quite a bit because it's all from my own perspective. It
Mm.
is all my own lessons, my own failures, and my own, this is how I got through it. This is what I learned. There's no science, there's no therapist's mumbo jumbo. It is just my experience. So it's a little nerve-wracking to put something that is so personal and soul-bearing out there. And I really took her words to heart. And my editor said the same thing. She's like, I feel like there's something missing. And I rewrote the first chapter, completely redid it, focusing on one moment in my life that is the catalyst as to why I started my healing journey. And I sent it to my friend who I actually met on Instagram. And she messaged me and said, I'm crying. I just want to hold you. I just wish
Wow.
I could have been there for you and walked you through that process. And I feel everything you're writing. And she sent me a picture of her actually crying. And
Wow.
I just felt so good. The goal for the book is for people to feel my writing. I want them to read it and have it force them into introspection. And the people who have read the book so far have all given me pretty much the same feedback, that it has really made them stop and think. And there's been a few chapters where people have had to stop mid-chapter to kind of take a breath and regroup and finish the chapter. And at the end of each chapter, there's a question or a prompt for you to write or doodle or just sit and think about. And it's actually being done. The readers are actually doing it. And my effort to be nude and raw has really paid off, because the goal is for people to read it and think, if she can do it, so can I.
So would you say just from that reaction that sort of like it's validated your goal and your promise that you set out? Because holy mackerel, for like one of your friends to literally send you a picture of them in tears because of your writing, that is that is very powerful. And B, that I would dare say is like the work of like a master storyteller and master of words, because that I don't think I've ever had anyone on the show talk about a reaction such as that when it comes to their stories, like when they're like full on in tears. So that is like powerful. And as I said before, I imagine that also has validated your promise in a sense. Would I be wrong in saying that?
No, definitely. Definitely feel like I've done what I've wanted to do. And I'm really excited to put it out and for people to read it and get more feedback from people. And I really, really hope that readers will find me on Instagram and ask me questions and tell me what chapters were hard for them, what chapters were too easy, and what they might like to see next.
Definitely. And I also think that is probably the one thing about being honest that we really do like is like getting that feed, but it's also, as I'm sure you definitely agree, Helen, especially pertaining to this type of writing nonfiction, self-healing and self-discovery books, the rawness factor and the realness factor is, I dare say, slightly different from someone who's writing like fantasy and fiction. But I will say that there is a commonality where it is a lonely process to write something that you're very passionate about, to spend hours and hours editing, years trying to get it off one page into another media, and then presenting it out there on the digital stage, and then that voice of imposter syndrome in the back, nagging in the back of your mind, trying to deter you and saying, you shouldn't be doing this, you're crazy, you think people are actually going to care. So have you ever had those moments of imposter syndrome? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to write this story, because this is a story that is worth telling?
I actually have had those moments where I've thought, do I keep writing? Is this really something I should be doing? I actually had a family member who had said that they wanted me to stop writing, that the first journal I had put out was not worth much. And it really did kind of shake my confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually spoke to a friend on Instagram, Megan, and she was just appalled. And the same day, I got a message from another author who had bought the journal and thanked me for putting it out because it had really helped her get out of her head and get her feelings onto paper. And she was only halfway through it. And she said, I know it's a journal and you should really be doing it daily, but I just kept going. I I felt good getting what I was feeling off of my chest. And it made me feel really good. And Megan also was someone who bought the journal and she had given it to somebody else to try and help them get through some mental blocks. And it really helped them too. And that just made everything worth it. And when I did start to feel a little shaky writing Let's Get Nude, um, small group of women on Instagram, super talented women, writers, editors, artists, just the best cheerleaders in the world, and really encouraged me to keep going and not to stop writing. And I owe them a lot.
Nice. And this is a little tangent when you mentioned Megan. Is this the same Megan who is also a reviewer on Instagram?
Yes.
I knew it. I knew it 'cause I don't know if you were one of the people who commented on her video because I was
I was.
thinking, I knew it. I knew it. For those who don't know who I'm referring to, last month I had a guest on the show. Her name was Megan. Incredible woman, incredible person, and she has her own business as a book reviewer and blogger. Very talented, very cool. Definitely check her out. But just a little tangent, but that is really great, how that you had this community behind you who, as you said, have been your biggest cheerleaders to really support you, which will then come later towards the end of the interview. But now we're going to turn over to the business side of being an author because I always love this discussion. Now, when it comes to a book like this, a nonfiction self-help book, I would imagine, well, every audience in the publishing world is vastly different depending on the genre that you're writing in or the field, whether it's history, fantasy, science fiction, thriller, in the case nonfiction, self-help, self-healing, and so forth. So I would imagine doing market research into the audience to make sure, okay, am I getting this audience? So for you, from your first journal to now, Let's Get Nude, how important was it for you to like really hone in on, okay, this is the audience that I'm going to try to meet? And if one of you could tell us about that process.
So the first journal I put out really was just an effort on my part to try and generate a small side income for my family.
Right.
And with Let's Get Nude, it was more about what it could do. I saw a real potential and almost a movement of Let's Get Nude. I was imagining this huge hashtag of Let's Get Nude and people really developing this mindset and growing. And when I joined Bookstagram, I started learning about ARC readers and beta readers and connecting with people. And I spent a lot of time just going through Instagram looking for other book lovers and reaching out to authors and getting more comfortable randomly saying hi to somebody and it turning into this amazing conversation. And I slowly started to realize that there are targets. There are certain people who will read certain books. And
Right.
with this kind of book, I thought there's a much wider audience than I think there is. Because everyone I'd spoken to, everybody I asked, what got you into fantasy? Why do you read? We are all going through something. Everybody has a reason as to why they stick to a certain genre more than another. And what I found was that people read to escape reality.
Right.
That is a general consensus.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes escaping reality only does so much temporarily. I want Let's Get Nude to go out to everybody, and it kind of makes you think, I don't need to escape reality. I've got this. I have the tools, I have the suggestions, and I can put them into practice. And don't get me wrong, you can have every tool in the toolbox, but when you are ready to pop off on somebody, you may just have to look back and be like, I could have handled that better.
Right.
Maybe next time. And that's the goal.
Nice.
So in my interaction on Instagram, I'm just trying to reach as many people as possible and realizing that with self-help books, with motivational books, it's not as strict as you might think. The audience isn't as tight as you might think. And if you do it in the right way, you can reach so many more people. And that really is just the goal. I'm just talking to anybody that answers me, really. Anybody that's interested, even if it's just one chapter from the book that helps you, it was worth writing.
That's great. And ultimately, I like what you said, how for all books, the general consensus is we want to escape reality because that's what books are. They're meant to take us out of reality into a world, even if it's for a little bit. But sometimes it is important to face reality and help us reevaluate ourselves to make us better people, which is also important. And there's a question I forgot to ask in the beginning. So, from your first journal and to now, did you have an idea that, okay, I want to self-publish these two books, or did you want to try your hand in the beginning at being traditionally published?
I knew I was going to self publish. It never occurred to me to try and be traditionally published. I didn't even really know that traditionally published was a thing until Bookstagram. Um, my first journal, I just kind of put out. There was no announcing it, there was no teasing it or anything like that. I just did it. With this book, it means so much more to me. It feels like it's more. And for that reason, I thought I want to do this better. I want to try and make this a real publication. I want people to know that it's coming. I want people to be looking forward to it. And I want that when it's released, a few people are already lined up to get it.
Absolutely. It's just the growth of being, self-published authors, because that's the thing, as I've mentioned numerous times on this channel, self-publishing has really taken a life of its own. Like in the beginning, like early 2000s or even 2010s, self-publishing wasn't that huge. But now, if you go into any bookstore, Barnes and Noble, anywhere, I guarantee you that at least 50% of the books we see are self-published, which is incredible because, as I'm sure you would agree, Helen, that in the beginning, when people think of self-published books, there's sort of like a stigma to it that it's not professional, it's not polished, it's not,
Mhm.
formatted correctly. But now you can't even tell the difference between a book that's traditionally published from, let's say, Tor or Angry Robot to a book that's self-published. And that's just like the evolution of the market, which is incredible. And it shows how these self-published authors have really come into their own in finding their voice as an author, which leads into the next question. So when writing Let's Get Nude and trying to make it an improvement on your first journal, what authors of their own self-motivation, self-help books really helped you sort of fine-tune the language and getting the point across and really coming to your own as an author?
Actually, I didn't have one.
Really? Okay.
Mm-mm. When I started writing Let's Get Nude, um, it really was just, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. And it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody's going to love it. But I truly believe that this is going to help at least one other person. And if my story, if my lessons can do that, I'm happy. It didn't occur to me to look at other authors' work. It didn't occur to me to look at other self-help books. And I was in my second or third round of edits before I even really thought about that. And now I would say I do know a few authors that have motivated me or kind of given me a kick up the ass without even knowing it. And in the beginning, no, it was just my desire to write something that I knew in my heart could be really important.
Okay. So would you say that you are an author who writes their books for themselves as opposed to writing books for an audience of mine? And I ask this because a lot of authors, or as authors, we always have, a story that we want to tell. But normally these are stories that we wish we had growing up that we enjoy, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, history, whatever. We don't really consider a reader in mind or an audience in mind. But if we want to share it, sometimes that's a different mindset. So for you, Helen, where do you sort of find yourself? Are you an author who writes for yourself, or are you an author who writes for a reader in mind or an audience in mind?
I think I'd say a little bit of both, just because when I started writing, it was because I had something to say. And as the book grew into more than what I thought it was going to be, I found myself putting me in the shoes of the reader. And I started writing with the idea that someone else is going to read this and feel something. They're going to get something from it. So I guess as it grew, it became more targeted towards the audience that would be reading it.
Nice. And leading into that, also as an add-on, whenever we authors write for a particular audience or reader in mind, we're always surprised by the fact that majority of our audience are people that we didn't necessarily market to or target to. But when we find that these people enjoy our works, that really opens up a new window of opportunity. It's like, oh, I didn't know you enjoyed this story. And I say this because that's probably the most beautiful things about being an author is the unexpected reader. We can always try to write for an audience in mind or a particular reader in mind, and we will probably hit that target. But on the off chance, we'll get a group of people who, A, have never read a book like ours, or B, a subject that we are writing about, and they thoroughly enjoy that. So for you, Helen, has your readership changed from your first journal to now?
I would say yes. I would definitely say yes, just because there is more to this book.
All right, all right. Now, before we go into the last business question, I do want to now look into more so of you being an art creator, because seeing your profile on Instagram, in addition to being an author, you're also an art creator for a lot of other authors too. So, can you tell us about how that came about and what you learned about being an art creator to which you are expecting in your own art creator terms of, this is what I'm looking for almost like reviews, the timetable, when to post reviews, or even how authors market to art creators?
So when I became an art creator, it wasn't even intentional. It just kind of happened.
All
I
right.
just realized that people were looking for art creators, and I started asking questions. And what is an art creator? What do you do? What is it about? What are you committing to? And I slowly just learned all you're doing is reading the book before everybody else. And I was super intrigued by that. And then I learned the feedback that you're giving can often help the author to, as you said, fine tune their work and just
Right.
perfect it. And I loved the idea of that. I loved the idea of being able to support other writers. And the book community is such a supportive community. It is hands down the best community on the internet. And I have enjoyed it so much. And connecting with other authors has been my favorite part. So I really dug into art reading just because I enjoyed the connection with the authors. I enjoyed being able to have a conversation, to ask questions, to learn about how they focus when they have no focus, and what gets them into writing, why they're writing the book. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And like I said, just art creating and being helpful, I really enjoy it.
Definitely. And I have to agree, Helen. On Instagram, I was surprised by how many indie authors were on Instagram. It's incredible. And as I've said numerous times on the channel, a majority of the authors that I'm showcasing here, my viewers and listeners, are from Instagram. And it's so
Mhm.
incredible to see this vast network of indie authors and traditional authors who are using Instagram as a platform to showcase their work, to talk about upcoming books, projects, collaborations. It's really incredible. And ultimately, we're going to talk about this later in the interview about a sense of community, but sort of as like a fun little question, because I don't really ask this question a lot. But for you, Helen, so you definitely argue to a lot of like fantasy, thriller, romance. So for you, what genre would you like to write in if you had the opportunity to?
It's funny you ask that question because I'm actually writing. I'm doing a fantasy book. That is
Ooh,
my next
okay.
project. And it's being written with somebody else. And that is really interesting because you have two different ideas, two different paths that are coming together to create something. So fantasy, hands down, has always been my go-to. And it has always been the one that I've dreamt about writing something in.
Nice. Now, you don't have to give too much information about it, but what can you give us as like a little teaser or taste of this upcoming book between you and this fellow author?
It's a unique idea. Um, Definitely going to see things that kind of make you gasp, take a
Ooh,
step back.
okay.
And I think you're going to finish the book and want to go back and see if you can notice the clues.
Ooh, okay. I like that. Cryptic. Amazing. Now, that kind of leads into the final question of the business side, but I'm going to give some a little more context to this. So, you've talked about up until now, you've wanted to tell this story, Let's Get Nude, to really be a story of yourself and being raw and open about who you are and your journey of self healing. And from what you've talked about before, a lot of people have been like, oh my gosh, I'm like in tears. I'm just like, I just want to hug you, as you've mentioned that. That's really, really powerful. And I definitely think with any author who gets these initial reactions, it's good. But I also definitely feel that it could also be depending on the person and what kind of author you want to be, or which is, do you want to be an author or do you want to be known as an author, can blind a person to like, I'm going to make the best motivation book that the market's ever seen. I'm going to do all of this. And a lot of young authors and new authors can be blinded by this, which has led me to the conclusion that, well, from the advice of another fellow author who brought this up before, Natalie Wright, said, there's no guarantee that your debut book is going to be the start of your legacy. Now, I've mentioned before, there have been exceptions to that rule. Andy Peliquin, who has flourished in the fantasy genre. I've interviewed him, and he is incredible. He's written 4 series of different books, which are amazing, and I featured one on the channel. But on the offside, for new authors going into the industry and in the business, we have our rise, our fall, our rise again, and our fall once more. And then that voice of imposter syndrome really coming back harder and really nagging at us, which comes back to the long-term goals you saw yourself as an author. Did you want to be an author or be known as an author? Because those are two very different mindsets. So for you, Helen, in your opinion, how important is it for new authors to really understand that no matter what book you're writing, no matter what genre, or if it's fiction or nonfiction, there's no guarantee that your first anything is going to be the start of your legacy, but it should not deter you from writing if writing and being an author is something that you are passionate about?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's really about what it is that you want to do. Like for me, I'm not thinking about, am I going to be known as an author? Is this going to be the book for me? It's really not a mindset I have. For me, I started writing because I had something to say and I thought it would touch someone. I continued writing because I knew this was going to help someone. It was going to touch someone. And I'd be lying if I said I don't hope that I am able to have some kind of small income from my book, or books as it stands. But I don't think there's this is the trick kind of answer. I don't think there's a how to answer because
Right.
literature is so different for everybody. Like
Mhm.
you said, two people are going to read the same book and they will look up and give you two very different perspectives. And it is the same for writing. You start one way, you might finish another. You might finish as you start, or it might be vice versa. I think you have to really consider why you're writing, what you're writing, and keep your head on your shoulders. Don't allow the outside voices to influence you too much one way or the other.
Definitely. And your answer very much reminds me of my friend uh, Kim Applegren, who has the same, response to that. And awesome. And then listening to that, it definitely reminds me of her. And, you're absolutely right. How we approach writing as authors is very different based upon our own experiences, the books we've read, and what kind of authors we want to be. And that is completely okay. And it is important, just to add on to that, that grit trumps talent. There, no matter if you're the best prose, the best storyteller, you can bring characters to life at ease. You can literally make me want to eat the paper because you wrote something about
Yes.
food, which is so good. Doesn't matter. If you're not willing to go through the hurdles, the fires, and the flames, little Dragon Force reference for those who love that band, if you aren't willing to go through the consequences and the hurdles that every author goes through, self-published or traditionally published, then you may want to reevaluate yourself. But if you do accept the challenges, if you do accept the hurdles, then let me tell you this: grit transforms into talent, and that will help you grow as an author and as a writer. Plus, it's always nice to have a good group of people to really help motivate you and be by your side, which, Helen, as you've mentioned before, you've had a large group of people that you've met on Instagram that have really been your cheerleaders. So you've name dropped a few, but is there anyone else that has really been by your side on this journey of yours? And have any other authors noticed your journey, noticed your work, and have given credit where credit is due to you in a sense of, like, a validation? In a sense, and I say this because a lot of authors, or for anyone going into a business or industry, to bring all your knowledge into it is one thing, but to see your peers recognize your talent and give credit where credit is due is another thing entirely.
That is very true. Um, the girls, I have 4 girls on Instagram that I really communicate with the most, and they are my core people. They are my cheerleaders, they are my friends, confidants, and advice givers. Absolutely amazing women. Megan is one of them. Kaylee, who is an artist and a writer, absolutely incredible. Leslie, she has an amazing page where she's always highlighting authors, artists, editors. She's there for everybody. She wants everybody to do well, and she wants to uplift others as much as she can. Kate is another editor, and she is just absolutely amazing. Her heart matches her beauty. She's just incredible. And all 4 of these women have such beautiful souls, and I am so glad that I met them. Authors, I can think of a few. E.G. Verreau wrote Hostility and Heartstrings. Such a good book. I'm obsessed. I have not finished the book yet because I keep getting distracted, but I love the book. I can't stop thinking about it. I really need to know how it ends. It's so good. Her writing is just, it flows beautifully. And she is the sweetest person. And anything I post about my own book, she likes it, she comments, she sends me a message, she shares it. And H.M. Wolf is another author I've only recently connected with. She has a book coming out that is called Book of Sin with a C.
Ooh.
And if you go onto her page, oh my goodness, it is just beautiful. And it highlights her book incredibly. And my connection to her is very, very recent, but she as well went through my page and just liked everything to do with my book and sent me messages and was saying, this quote, I love this quote. The title for your book is amazing. It's so fitting. It's so unique. And I really, really appreciated these words coming from other authors that I've seen their work. I admire their work. H.K. Horton wrote Concealed. Really good book. It starts off in London, so she had my heart right away. She captured it beautifully. I felt like I was back home. It really made me want a cup of tea and some chocolate. So I got the tea, did not get the chocolate. It was really sad, but the book was really good. And she as well has been very, very encouraging to me. There are so many that I could point out. Courtney Wynn, who wrote Versailles, she's also another person who has been very encouraging to me. And just the way she handles her book and how she's going about everything and how kind she is to everybody really, really is inspiring to see. And she's so willing to boost and help other authors. They all are, really. And I think it's so much fun to see that even in the midst of promoting their own books, they're more than willing to share other authors' work at the same time.
Definitely, and I have to agree. Again, I've also had Courtney Williams also on the channel, and she is an incredible person who, if you haven't seen her episode, please definitely check it out. Oh my gosh, she is just a ray of sunshine. She
She
is
really is.
so passionate, so kind, and I really am looking forward to her book coming out later this year.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I have to agree. Learning from the authors who I've met on Instagram and also featuring here on the channel and reading their work, it really kind of pushes me to be a better author because
Yeah.
I am seeing, oh my goodness, these people are making incredible stories, like in the genres that I love: fantasy, science fiction, history. And it's, making me think, how do I go about marketing? How do I go about being a good reviewer for other authors? How do I go about making a flyer for my ARC readers for my next book? So all of that is important, and I've learned so much from them. Which for you, Helen, I'm turning over to you, um, which is, with everything that you have learned and still learning about the world of being an author, and from all your friends that you have allowed into your inner circle of indie authors and authors in general, what is your word of wisdom to anyone who wants to transition from writing as a hobby to writing professionally, even if they may not reach the goals that they want? They're at least getting their stories out there. And even if they get like a small group of people that's their following, that is perfectly fine. Because if you have a loyal following of people, that is that is enough. I guess what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Um, Actually, there's another author, Lauren. It took me so long to be able to say her name, and it's so simple. She's written Medromeda. It is a Greek mythology-based book. It's a retelling of Medusa,
Ooh.
so I'm so excited for this book. It's not out yet. I haven't actually seen a release date, I don't think, but she is actually one author that really connected with me. Her page, the title of her book, when she talks about it, like the passion that she has, it's incredible. And I think for anybody who's writing and wants to make that transition to doing it professionally and actually putting together a piece of work that they're going to put out, the best advice I have is something that she said to me, and it's just that no one else's way is your way. And I've seen videos, and it can be really intimidating. I've seen reels of authors with their dining tables full of paperwork, and they have outlines and ideas and suggestions and not to do this, and this is my yes pile. And I've almost finished Let's Get Nude. I will not say how far I am with the fantasy, but gotten a good ways in, and I haven't done that once. Everything really is coming into my head and it goes onto the paper. And myself and my fellow author just bounce off of each other. There's no reading it over too deep. I haven't read over anything I've written. I just write, I message her, like, have a look, tell me what you think, what's changing, let's continue. Because for me, the more I read over something, the more likely I am to change too much. And the easiest way for me to complete is to just write. And then when I'm finished, get the feedback and perfect it. So doing it the way I am with a fellow author is something that we are figuring out as we go. And for anyone who wants to get into it, do it your own way. Nobody's way is your way. And it might not look like anything anybody else is talking about. And suggestions are great, but suggestions are not law. You don't have to do it. If you hear a suggestion and you think, I'm going to try that, go for it. But nothing says that you have to stick to it.
Absolutely. You know, that is perfect. That is absolutely true. Authors, you know, we always try to, I would like to say, one person said to me about authors that we are liars, cheaters, and thieves. And initially, I believed that, which there is some truth to that, because we make stuff up, we cheat people out of time, and we steal from other authors because the same story has been told over numerous times: the hero's quest, the archetypes, the tropes, and so forth. And that's fine. But how you create your own story is unique and to your own person. Case in point, The Coward and the Warrior by Stephen Arion are probably some of the best works of fiction I have read thus far. And it throws the hero's journey on his head, because I don't want to spoil it too much, but whatever we imagine of the hero's journey, like the idealistic person going on a quest with a group of heroes, that gets thrown on its head in a 180, and we are pretty much given what I like to call the Logan take of the heroes, and you know, the stories written about them. And ultimately, that was some of the best works of fiction I have ever read. And ultimately, just as Helen said, suggestions are not law. You can take them with a grain of salt, you can incorporate them, but no one says you have to take the suggestions and fully integrate them. They're there to provide a different perspective, and ultimately, your work's your own. No one knows your story better than you. And if you understand that and you realize that, then your journey as an author is only going to get better. And with that, we will end this amazing author interview here on the channel. I want to give a huge thank you to author Helen G-W for coming on the show and telling us about her upcoming book, Let's Get Nude, as well as a little teaser into her fantasy story with her fellow author. Helen, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. Now, before we end, where can people find you on social media to interact with you, to join your ARC reader sign up, and be caught up to date with Let's Get Nude release date, as well as more teasers about your upcoming fantasy book?
So Helen K.GW is my Instagram handle, and it is the place I am most active. I have a post on my page where you can comment to say that you're interested in ARC reading. Right now, anyone that signs up for the ARC will get a copy of the ARC. I've already sent out a version of the book. The next set of ARCs that is going out will be the final version of the book. So I'm really excited about that. And that'll be going out sometime soon. My phone has actually lit up a few times with some new signups. So I'm really excited. And I'm going to do the cover release soon. So I'm excited about that. Anything about Let's Get Nude will be on that page. And when I'm ready to start teasing about my next project, it'll be there too.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the first interview on the channel, the first author interview, I must say, on the channel for the month of June. Thank you also very much for your love and support, and for subscribing to my channel, as well as subscribing to my newsletter. It really means a lot to me. And I want to give again a huge thank you to author Helen G.W. for coming on the show and telling us about Let's Get Nude and her journey as an author and a writer. She is an incredible person, and I wish her the very best going forth on her journey. So, Helen, thank you again for coming
Thank
on
you.
the show. And again, I wish you the best going forward with Let's Get Nude, as well as your upcoming in the future fantasy story with your fellow author. I look forward to more details about that. And if you are in need of an ARC reader or want to promote it on another media, let me know. I will be more than happy to promote it here on my channel.
You will be my first call.
Awesome. Thank you, Helen. And thank you again, viewers, for joining us. This has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, asking you to like, subscribe, and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And if you're subscribed to my newsletter, what guests are you excited to see here on the channel? Until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out. And until next time, have a wonderful day.